All right, y'all. You ready for the biz card revoked? It's the game of the day,
I'm ready.
or the week, or the month, whichever it turns out that we're going to be doing if we don't get out of this one safely. So let's talk about which one of these marketing habits will get your biz card revoked the fastest.
Okay.
Is it posting once every 6 months? Is it talking to everyone but targeting nobody? I could be doing that, or copying someone else's content word for word.
Okay.
Copying someone else's content.
I mean, word for word. Golly, you gotta have a little bit of something different going on in there.
Yeah, plagiarism.
Well, and kind of just sad.
It's very
But
sad.
let's just
You
say
can't
that.
be any more unique than that.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness! But there are some folks who struggle in their ability to innovate and be creative, right?
They do say copying is a form of flattery, so maybe that's how they're looking at it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that card is revoked.
That was a good try, though. That was a good try. Yeah.
You know, I think for me, copying word for word is pretty bad, and I'm gonna give a pass on that because we've highlighted that. But talking to everybody, but targeting nobody.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal in the business, the small emerging business that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's something to be said about, casting a wide net, but there's something else about throwing noodles against the wall and hoping that they stick, right? Casting a wide net is there's intentionality, when a fisherman goes out to the sea and they're trying to consume or gather as much as possible. But when you are really just aimlessly throwing, you're sacrificing a ton of resources when it comes to that. And that's you in that hamster wheel that's constantly spinning. So I hate to use so many different metaphors, but I think at the end, if you aren't targeting a specific audience or a specific segmentation, you really are putting all the resources that you have at risk. And you're going to find yourself coming up with the short end of the stick.
You are. And this is just saying about how if you don't know what road will take you there, any road will get you there. So it's just kind of aimlessly driving. You might just land there one day. But the question is it going to be, 5, 10 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have it in you?
Yeah. When I think about this, uh, talking to everyone but targeting no one, I see a person just in a dark room, just walking around trying to figure out like what am I, you don't know exactly. You can bump into anything and make friction, but you don't really know exactly like who you're going to bump into, or how it's going to impact you, or how it's going to hurt you, or anything. You just walking around in the dark when you don't have a target audience. So I'm going to go with talking to everyone but targeting no one. If you do not have that, if you do that, you will get your biz card revoked.
Yeah, you certainly will. And tell me, what one did you end up going with?
I went with the same one.
You went the same one.
I went with the same one.
I think I'm gonna have to go with you guys. It's a silent killer. Constantly building credibility, and we talk about that with this targeting nobody, but talking to everybody. And
Silent
that's
killers.
what we're talking about today when we're talking about marketing and visibility. So I'll go with that one. I'll go with that one with you, and let's get into it.
Let's
So
get into it.
hey, so today it's Tracey's keeping it real, and I got my strength and strategy partners here. I have my cohorts, which is Tav, and I have Tommy, and we're here this afternoon talking about strength and strategy and understanding that businesses can't survive if people don't know they exist. And we talk about marketing is like it's so important that if you are not wanting to market your product, you will be marketing it without even realizing it, because you're going to be marketing a for sale sign. You're going to be talking about that in your for sale pajamas that you bought with that for a sale cup of coffee that you have. All this stuff was marketed while you writing down what you're going to say in your for sale business ad because you didn't take time for marketing and visibility to let people know you exist. So let's talk about that. What does that look like?
Wow, that was good.
Because people don't realize that that's really when you're not marketing and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, that you end up doing it without even wanting to. So let's talk about the power of the messaging and knowing your target audience, because we already just talked about, talking to everybody but targeting nobody. So how do we do that? What's the power in that?
Target audience. Let's talk about that. I think part of the challenge with target audience is um the vulnerability that it takes for your audience to tell you who they are. So we go into business, we have a product, and we think we know exactly who's going to want this. We did all the data. We know this market, this neighborhood, this demographic, whatever. And we can get stuck in that. So now you're constantly trying to sell to who you think wanted your product instead of marketing yourself in a way where you open yourself to other possibilities and you let your target audience come to you. Um,
don't you have to figure out who they are first? So what kind of
You do have to figure out who they are. I think when we talk about it though, it really is about you have to do a lot of work to really zero in and nail down who that is. It's easy to come up with an idea. It's less easy to figure out who the target market is for that idea. But it's less easier to think that if I'm not getting the results that I was looking for, maybe I need to reposition who I thought my target audience was. And so what I'm saying is target audience is great if you know who they are and you can zero in on them and you can have conversations with them. But I want to talk more to the struggling entrepreneur who's like, I know who my audience is and it's not working. Well, maybe this is an opportunity for you to really start to think about marketing and visibility in a different way.
Okay.
So I would say, to close that up, I would say target audience is about building something. We're old enough to remember the movie with the quote, "If you build it, they will come." That is a huge part of business. Now, you should not go out into the space just like hoping that somebody wants what you have but oftentimes it's really about letting people, getting your name, getting your product, getting your brand out into the world enough where people start to gravitate towards it. And then you can start to shift. This is part of my audience, but this is a bigger part that I really didn't know about.
And I think too, to your point, and some of the things you talk about is that consistent messaging that you do need to put out there, given enough time to see if who you're reaching out to and who you believe is your customer is gravitating to that message that you're putting out there, or are you in fact bringing in another crowd that you didn't expect, which is sometimes okay, because then it's like, oh, I didn't expect you to like this.
Yep.
So maybe that's your market and you just didn't realize it.
And I just figure we probably have folks watching these podcasts, right, who are struggling. And it's like, okay, I hear you guys talking about this language and that verbiage and this and that and the other, but I can't figure it out for my business, right? So just want to lean into that person and say, it could be that maybe there's a different target audience for whatever you're selling or your service or your product, and really think about that and allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to figure that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would add, because something that you said really, provoked a thought for me around the bottom line, which we don't talk about enough, right? So we think about the targeted audience that most of our emerging businesses are looking for. Sometimes we either price ourselves out or we don't value ourselves enough, and we find ourselves settling for what we can get. And a lot of times when it comes to some of the you might have a product that is more valuable, but if you're at some local market where everything is discounted, you devalue your products and services. And so more times than other, you have to understand what your margins are and understand where do you need to be targeted. There's been a real saying, and you all probably have heard, you could buy a bottle of water in an urban environment and then go to an airport and the price points are different, but it's the same bottle of water,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's no different in the products that we have. We've just been, if we was to keep it real, right? We've been really like, I wouldn't suggest like we've been brainwashed, but we have this thought process that we have to settle for a particular audience versus really elevating yourself and your business in a way that allows you to bring a product and or a service into an environment of which you will want to reach as it relates to the mission and the vision of your business, and not necessarily assume that just because you are a small business that you have to settle for something less. So I would say really identify through the margins of what it is that you're pricing your product and or service out for. As a result of that, then start to identify what the segmentation and the demographic of whom you're looking for, and then really strategize on how to budget properly in order for you to put yourself in those environments so you can create the target market that you want, not that you have to have because you have no other choice.
Absolutely. And to that point, I mean, I've known a business that she evidently got a really great deal in this little strip mall right in the community that she was opposite of what she was selling.
Mm-hmm.
So she's selling, all kind of Afrocentric clothing and big earrings and big glasses and all kinds of cool stuff. But in that community where her shop was, that she had to have gotten a deal on being in that shop, then people did not identify with anything in there, including her. They didn't want her or her stuff in that market, in that area, and they let her know it. And so she ultimately wasn't successful there because she planted herself in a demographic that was not about the product she was selling.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to travel that far. We're going to pass 50 stores to get to you, to go to your place because you're way over there. Might have been a nice location, but was it the right demographic? So we're settling. We're settling for getting the store location that it's nice, and we're figuring it's nice, and we're figuring it's in a nice location, and we figure the price is right. But is it? Is it right? Because if it makes you shut your doors and it doesn't bring people in to buy your product, instead they're coming in there to make you mad and cuss you out because they want you out of the neighborhood. So is it worth it? So we really gotta stop setting ourselves up to fail and make sure when we are picking the demographics and who we think our clients are, it reflect the community and the area that we're in to make it make sense.
Yeah. You know, if I could just add one more point, because what you just stated goes understated for the mental struggle that entrepreneurs have when they make decisions that doesn't look more long term, and they're looking for some kind of short term gain. Just as that example was, I got a storefront. They're proud. They're looking to build their legacy. They have their name in lights. It feels great, and so it should.
Yeah.
But then the heartache that comes with the everyday struggle of being in an environment that's not beneficial to you spoil the fun out of being an entrepreneur. Right? Because now you're not generating enough revenue and it's impacting the experience of your employee base if you can retain them. Now you're doing more work because if you're in that environment and you have to be there, you can't go out to seek new business because you just have to wait on the traffic to come.
Which is only coming as it's not the right traffic.
Right. And it's a domino effect. So I think for this audience, right, that's listening in, it is purely about the strategy, right? We talk about the strategy. This is the part of the strategy that you have to take a step back and then really analyze, like, am I making the right decision for the right reason that's going to give me long-term sustainability, or am I making a short term decision that's going to have an immediate impact and level of gratification that won't have that same value as they continue to grow their business.
Absolutely. And you know what? And that's just as bad, Tommy, as being and Tav as being at the Mall of America. You might think you're in the right place, but by the time you get through paying your booth rental,
Exactly.
and the product that you're selling is not bringing in that much per item, you got to really start to value that out and say, is there a value in me being here? You know, is it because you might have wanted to start in a much smaller location that made it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you never made it to the mall, it might be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you going where it's already going to outprice you just because you want to be big time and you ain't ready for showtime yet, don't do it because it'll set you out.
Yeah, and we might cover this too, and so I'll be short in this. You know, you think about the Starbucks, you think about the Walmarts, you think about where those places are located, their sites. They're really intentional
Oh, very intentional.
about those places for a reason. They do their homework. They understand the demographics in the area. They know what the median income is. They understand how the traffic patterns, things along those lines, things that we tend to overlook and just look for placement, and we don't do enough of the homework. So I hope that at some point we get a chance to deep dive into that.
I think that we're going to have to because if we don't, then we're not going to do our listeners and our viewers a lot of service because we got to help them understand these are valuable. It could be, you could be sitting on a gold mine if you're just going to the right place,
Mm-hmm.
or you could take your same product and go into the wrong place and never win. So, and talking about gold mines, let's talk about the low cost of marketing tactics. So sometimes it's like I want to be able to market my product, but I can't afford it. You know, so using community collaboration and content to be seen is big, and sometimes it's just partnership opportunities, being in the right place, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say if I had the opportunity to start my business over, I would prioritize marketing. I and I encourage all of my clients to do so. It doesn't feel like it's when you're getting out there and you're getting started and you're building your product or create your service or whatever it is. Marketing doesn't feel like it's always a high priority, but you will feel it when you start to run out of steam
Mm.
from just jump moving forward and being in all the spaces. So we need to start prioritizing marketing, even if that's depending on what your budget is. That could be anywhere from $20 a month for Canva, or it could be $500 a month for a radio spot, or it could be $1,000 a month, right? Like whatever it is based on what your budget is. But I just want to say, first and foremost, especially as minority businesses, we need to start prioritizing marketing, and then we need to get creative even in marketing. um I tell everybody all the time, when you see me, you will only see me in my something great branded t-shirts or sweatshirts or whatever that looks like, because I will be my own billboard until I can afford one.
Mm-hmm.
So everywhere you see me, I'm marketing myself. This is my business. This is what I do. And people want to lean in when they see "be great on purpose." What does that mean, right? And then you have the conversation. So there are ways to get your name out there. And I think the other piece of it too is keeping it real. I be tired.
Yeah.
I mean, after I get done,
Yeah.
like this morning, we had a bunch of posts to do on social media to launch this and launch that, and we got other contracts that we're fulfilling, and and then there's something great in and of itself, and the restructuring of the business model, and then we're recording and doing all these things. I don't really want to go back to the office and record, or create collateral or flyers or whatever. At the end of the day, though, it is going to determine the success of my business. So I try to take care of myself, because that way I don't get too tired. I'm eating well. I'm right, so I can get that second win and go back, because until you can actually afford somebody to do that marketing for you, you have to be diligent about making it happen for yourself. So just putting that point out there, and you have to be creative, and you have to really put the energy into it so people see you. Otherwise, you could be sitting on a gold mine and nobody would know.
Nobody would have a clue.
Yeah.
So Tommy, when we talk about using tactics like community, how would we do that? How can we be creative using community?
Yeah.
They're gonna have everybody running around with T-shirts now. That would be one way I could see that happening.
Yeah, I think mm, depending on your target audience, if we was to go back and talk about that, it's really important to understand, and we talk about this during the Strength Strategy Lab, the difference between branding and marketing,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is a difference. There's a difference between branding and marketing. Branding is an idealism of whom you are and what you represent, right? That is what branding is about. So Tav has mentioned in other podcasts that we've had that, her logo and her mantra sets the expectation and tone of what her brand is. Mm-hmm. Same thing with McNeal Management, right? There's an expectation. However, from a marketing standpoint, that is as if in fact that you're looking to introduce something to the world that you are looking to have some reciprocal value to. So I'm offering a service or a product, and in return, I'm asking you to buy into whatever that is. And so I think it's really important that if you are leveling yourself from a target marketing on community, and that's the focus, then us as emerging businesses, we have a right to be able to help support those businesses, especially if that business is marketing a level of products and services that meet and exceed the expectation of excellence. So I use Spokesman as an example, right? I know from my business for Flame, there has been opportunities to advertise, right?
Yeah.
Right through your distribution, but I also know that there has been acknowledgement of the work that we've done to associate ourselves with the brand. Now, one can go hand in hand and say, as a reader, right? Either they grabbing your papers and or they're going onto your media platforms. They see Flame Mobile Kitchen as a point of reference of something that is credible enough to be marketed. And as a community member, I want to add some sense of value to that, either coming in as a client or having you help me provide a service.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way that we can touch community.
Got it. Okay. Well, then in that case, I mean, because I want to make sure that when people are using community, that they are seeing how they can make that connection. And we talk about the collaboration or content that can be seen, such as your T-shirt. And when you think about a Nike, for example, they got the little teeny little mark here, but it's them, and so they're using it, as a marketing tool that's out there, and you can see it. And then they even have some of their little T-shirts that have little sayings, and I think that's where it comes in too. Is like using your logo so that it's recognizable once you get it to that point of it being recognizable, and then having it say something that the community would gravitate to. Because you think about what people want the message to be. I'm cool, or what's this new saying these kids are saying now? It's me. I can't remember what it was.
Hopefully, it's not 6'7".
No, I heard it was 6'7" too. This one was. I was like, "What is that?" Because my little cousin put it on one of our shirts, and I'm like, "What does that mean?" And she just said it again. I can't remember now what it was.
It's the greatness for me.
Is it the? Yeah, I think it is. But
and then you fill in the middle, whatever you think it is.
Yeah,
okay, yes,
exactly.
yes.
But it's just 3 words that you're really tying into, and but for her peers, that would sell the T-shirt. But I didn't understand what it was trying. So I'm just a little out of tune on that one. But I get it. I get the whole idea. So how we market our products and how we come to the marketplace with them, that also matters. But because we can also have people walking around with our stuff on, we got to make sure they want to market what it is that their messaging is. So that little Nike sign or something like that makes them want to wear that Nike shirt because their message is really what's being said that they're happy to do. So we have to kind of think about all these elements when we're looking at the whole marketing and visibility. But we're also talking about how to turn visibility into credibility and setting measurable goals for engagement and reach. So how do we do that? What goals do we set? What's the measurable ones? What is that?
When I think of what you just shared, for me, when it comes to the consumer need, is to avoid the bait and switch.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So more times than others, especially in the day and age where we talk about social media really kind of plaguing and we don't know what fake news is or not.
AI.
Right. And AI, right. You don't know what it is that you have. And so when you talk about turning it into a level of credibility, you got to stand behind your product. Right. And that means that you have to set a true expectation of what it is that you're offering to the consumer and have enough testimonies and or enough examples that build a level of credibility that someone would be able to speak about your products and services when you're not in the room.
Right.
Well, when they see that logo or hear your mantra, that they relate to that, right? Because now that resonate with them in a way that's different than the cliche of just assuming that, I'm gonna put this out here and just assume that folks will get it. No, people want the realness of what you're bringing to the table, which is how they are able, meaning businesses are able to stay around long term as a Nike. Like, you don't stay around that long. You could push a lot of money out there, but the quality of the material still have to hold up. The look needs to trans in time, right? You think about all the things that you've seen along the way in terms of the evolution of it. Well, as emerging business, we have to have that same mindset.
At least.
And going into, if that means that we have to cater to our consumers in order to provide them with what they're looking for, but that lends itself to being able to touch them where they are, but then them reaching back out to continue to do business with you.
Absolutely. And and to the point, because I was like, it, this comes back to when we talk about copying people word for word. So I looked at Nike as an example. So I threw that out there to start us off with, and to look at what they're doing. Sometimes it's copying them to a point because they spend a lot of money on figuring out how to best market the products that they have. And so if you just sit back and look at them and say, okay, what did you do? When you come out with something new, what'd you do? And especially if you got T-shirts you're selling. What did they do different? Well, they made this much smaller, and all these new sayings are much bigger because they know that's what's selling. That's what's hot. And so, is that something you want to follow them and lead or whatever? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on where you're at in your marketing strategy. If people identify with you already, that might work, but for others, it won't. So, you got to kind of take all that into consideration. But sometimes just watching the market kind of gives you an idea on if it's what you're doing and it's working for them. It could work for you on a different scale. You just have to kind of weigh out what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, as we kind of close on this segment, I think what for me, being that I've spent, 2 dozen years in a corporate environment, there's always a go to market strategy. More times than others, we as emerging business are very impulsive. Like, we have to slow down, right? And McNeal management, which is what I've always informed my clients, is my job isn't to speed you up, it's to slow you down. And to slow you down is to understand who is your target market, what are the segmentations, look at the demographics, understand that it's just not the cliche of the Nike, but how they brought influencers in, have they provided some level of service, to what kind of sponsorships are they donoring into other businesses to invest. Like, we can replicate the strategy around some of what these businesses are doing without necessarily having to tap into their budget.
Right, absolutely. And that's what that could be a deal breaker for us, and sometimes in a good way.
Yeah. I think what I would add to that too is to keep it real, right? I don't know the difference between branding and marketing. I'm gonna be honest.
Okay.
They slide together. This is why I keep Tommy McNeal around.
Well, that's
Because
he's the guy
when
that
we
can break it
partner,
down.
exactly, he gave two great definitions of branding and marketing, and right earlier in the episode, that was amazing. And so I'm in my brain like, oh, okay. Now, do I get the concept and how they separate each other? Yes, that makes sense to me. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm building a business. All those things make sense to me. What I want to say to people is, if you believe in what you're doing, sell it. Talk to people about it. Get out there. People will remember. I was at a conference earlier, and earlier last week, and I was talking to them about being the leader in your space. We hear people say all the time, people will remember how you made them feel. They may not remember what you made, what you did. Let me say that over. People may not remember what you did to them, but they will remember how you made them feel. I want us as entrepreneurs to take that a step further. Let people remember how you made them think. Let people remember when you came to the table with your product or service, it turned a light bulb, or switched a light bulb, or did something different for them. Don't let them forget that you were there. So if you're like me and you struggle to separate between branding and marketing, and you don't have the privilege of having Tommy McNeal with you to support you in these things, just believe in what you're doing. You're carrying something great.
Yeah.
Keep selling it, keep marketing, keep talking to people about it, and keep delivering something that is excellent so people want to come back to you. That's how you're going to build your visibility.
Oh, and we need that. You got to have the visibility. You got to have the marketing so that all of that ties in. People will do business with you if they know you're there and you got a good product and you're delivering it right and you're marketing it right and you're letting them know. But don't sit in your shop and think that everybody's just going to find you and everybody's just going to walk in.
Mm-hmm.
Do whatever you have to. And again, we talked about how you can do it for low cost. You can get out there and market your product for a low cost, doing little things that, even doing some boost on Facebook if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
It costs you about $50 to,
Mm-hmm.
how many people you're trying to reach. Going to events and wearing a t-shirt that's got your product on it, going to an event and passing out little samples of what you got, or just doing something to put yourself out there so that people know you exist. Because if you don't, then you're going to be again advertising and marketing about your business for sale, and you don't want to do that. So remember, Strength and Strategy are my partners here this afternoon as we talk about this whole business development and marketing and visibility. This afternoon has been our conversation. Got a lot more great conversations coming up on Tracey's Keeping It Real. So let's just keep it going with the real talk and the real conversations and the strength and strategy behind it. And let's help build a community with businesses that are thriving and surviving.